Good morning. Thank you very much for being here today on relatively short notice. Obviously, we called this press conference because of the announcement by Shell last night about their findings or lack of findings and their decision about the ongoing efforts in the Chukchi. It's a huge disappointment, a really big disappointment. I have been very optimistic about what Shell would find. I've been openly optimistic about it, and I believe Shell was very optimistic about what they were going to find. I first want to compliment Shell on all they have done in Alaska, all their efforts on safety and environment, and the extra mile that they have gone, their perseverance. This has not been an easy task for them. It's one that was met with lots of challenges along the way. Their staying power is very, 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 very impressive. The state's role in trying to assist Shell in some way certainly involved my time in the state of Washington on the Shell drill rig. From that drill rig, I went over and met with Washington Governor Inslee to talk to him about the importance of oil to Alaska's revenue. And following that, I had an opportunity to intervene on the situation in Portland with Governor Kate Brown and Governor, the mayor of Portland, about the interference by those who are on the bridge, not allowing the Shell vessel to come to Alaska. Explained about our short drilling window we have. So it's been an opportunity. I've had a great opportunity to interact with Shell throughout the process. Pete Slaby when he was here, and then now with Ann Pickard. I've spoken with Ann this morning. I'll meet with her later this afternoon, but we wanted to talk this morning a bit about the situation. I spoke this morning with Secretary of Interior Sally Jewell about this as well. We've agreed to meet either in Washington or in the Pacific Northwest as soon as possible, as soon as our schedules will intersect, not necessarily location-wise, but time-wise, that she has an opportunity. I will be in her office to really emphasize again the importance of putting oil in the pipeline. We're an oil-dependent economy, and we need to do everything we can to put oil. Safely put oil in the pipeline. I've talked to them in the past about the 1002 section of ANWR, which the 1002 section is 8% of ANWR. Really, if we could develop just the western half, now we're talking 4% of ANWR. We need to get some oil in the pipeline, and we need to do it as quickly as possible and in the safest method possible. And so I will. I certainly spoke with President Obama on Air Force One during that transit from Andrews Air Force Base to J-Bear about the importance of offshore, the importance of oil in general into our pipeline system. So I'm glad I had that time to establish those discussions. I will meet also. I requested a meeting at the White House as soon as possible to again talk about an opportunity to put more oil in the pipeline. If it's not going to come from offshore, let's safely develop it from onshore. So this is a tough day, a very tough day for Shell, a very tough day for Alaska. But I try to turn these difficult days into opportunities, and I think that's what exactly what we're going to do with this situation. Again, focuses on Shell and the fine job they did. They have employed hundreds of folks in Alaska. Lots of Alaskan contractors have been involved in the Shell effort. They've really looked at how can they have the most impact on our state during their development process, and I applaud that. So. While we're disappointed in the outcome, I always will be complimentary to Shell in the process that they used in working this effort. Certainly disappointed they could not have drilled multiple wells in that period of time, that amount of money. Typically around the world they would have drilled multiple wells. That was not the case here. It was not allowed. It was not permitted. So My opportunity as a result of this, or my obligation, I should say, as a result of this, is really to carry the message to Washington that we need to, Shell is interested in a lease extension for the area, and I'll do everything I can to help them with that lease extension. That'll be certainly one item on the agenda with the Secretary. But also the other opportunities in Alaska that are so close to our existing infrastructure that we absolutely must have access to. So I want to open it up for a question, but I also want to mention that this announcement today really further underscores the importance, the critical importance that we make sure that we monetize, that we develop our known resources. This was an effort by Shell to find additional resources, but here we have known resources. Obviously, the gas is the most proved gas resources in the world because of its number of times it's been re-injected, and certainly the 1002 section is we believe very prolific in resources. So it re-energizes what we already were doing, and it refocuses the emphasis on assurance that we get our resources monetized at a time that we are in the biggest deficit we've ever been in. So my time in Washington, I think, has been well spent in preparing me for this day, for this so that we can hit the ground running with folks that we have met with on numerous occasions to reemphasize the importance of this. With that, I'm happy to open up a question to Alex.
Alex will ask me this question. So you're hopeful that Shell will come back maybe in a few years if we can extend the leases? Is that maybe they're not out permanently?
Well, it's a good sign that they have not relinquished their leases. They want to renew them, extend them, and I'm more than happy to help. It's a glimmer of hope. I don't think I would hang my hat on it necessarily, but it's a glimmer of hope that they have not taken steps to relinquish their leases.
Okay, thanks.
Mark Jason, Associated Press. Can you explain a little bit how this really hurts Alaska? With some exploratory well, it would take up to a decade for oil to get into the pipeline if they had found it. Can you talk about the short-term impact for the state?
Well, a couple ways. One is is sort of the hope. I mean, I think that hope, people get excited about exploration and done safely and whatnot. So that has gone away. The revenues would not actually flow to Alaska from the offshore. It's one of those frustrating inequities that we have across our country, and off of the coast of Florida. The government of Florida receives 37.5% of the federal take off of the offshore Florida. We receive zero. And so I know Senator Murkowski has done a phenomenal job of introducing legislation to sort of to equalize that. But as the law stands today, we wouldn't receive any direct revenue. That's my frustration. Out of the 1002 section of ANWR, right next to Point Thompson, we'd receive 90% of the revenue, and the federal government would receive 10%. So that's really, from a money game, that's really where it's at for us. And although I was optimistic that Senator Murkowski would be successful with her legislation, one never knows. We don't need any legislation on just on the revenue sharing aspect of that. But the other part of it is that there's a lot of support industry in Alaska that was supporting the Shell operation. We are certainly working to try to keep the vessels. There's 30 vessels involved in their operation up here, trying to keep the vessels in Alaska over during the winter for next year. And obviously that's not going to be happening. But there was a lot of opportunity aside from just the oil in the pipeline. Yes.
Annie Fight, APR, and Senators Murkowski and Sullivan are blaming the Obama administration. What is your take on that? How much blame do you think? Well,
I certainly wish they could have drilled more wells. It's unusual to spend that kind of money and not drill more wells. There's no question about that. The fact that the one that they did drill was not successful was a huge disappointment. If they'd have been allowed to drill more wells, we can all speculate that perhaps they would have found oil, and that would have been a great thing. That didn't happen. So, the restriction. Do I think the restrictions hurt the prospects? Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that. But for me, it's certainly. We know we have to pick up the pieces from this and move forward, perhaps a little differently, perhaps a little more aggressively in certain areas. Yeah, I absolutely agree with them that that we should have been allowed to have more exploration up there. Because typically when you bring a rig, spend that much money, you'll drill multiple wells, and to be able just to drill the one, that was unfortunate. You're betting everything on that one particular well.
Elwood Bramer with the Alaska Journal of Commerce. Governor, you've talked at length about putting pressure on the president to get ANWR open. It would take an act of Congress, so why not go maybe through our congressional delegation and put pressure on Congress to move legislation to open?
We've done that before, and we get to the president and it gets vetoed. So I'm going to start with the person with the veto authority and start with that, because to go through all that effort just to have it vetoed, I'm going to work from the top down, I think, on that in that regard, or across the from the administration over to the congressional delegation. So.
Like SAKTU, were you surprised by this announcement, and what does this announcement mean for future prospects?
I was very surprised by the announcement. I had nothing really leading up that gave me an indication that, and I think Shell was surprised by it. I mean, I think that they, I know that they had a window in which to do their drilling. I knew that window. There was a discussion about having a 5-day extension. I was willing to help on that, and they didn't request that. But I was very surprised, and I think the impact in Alaska just another disappointment. I think that efforts to for more exploration activity up there. So I think it's certainly a huge disappointment across the state. At least it should be.
Miller with KTVA. How does this decision affect consumer confidence in Alaska?
Consumers' confidence? I'm not sure how consumers' confidence it would be. I mean, I think that there's a concern that from the general public, if that's what you're referring to, yep, that's appropriate. I think there, it does raise concern as far as if because there's been a lot of hope, even though there really wasn't as much revenue from the oil tied to it. There was usually the drilling activity that we were interested in. So I think it is a setback as far as the Alaskans are going to be disappointed that that was not successful, and also that we were limited in some way, not being able to drill multiple wells at the same time with the same cost. So I think it definitely impacts consumer confidence. You bet. On the phone, yeah, folks on the phone.
Operator, first question.
We do have a question from the line of Dan Murtaugh with Bloomberg. Please proceed with your question.
Hi, this is Dan Murtaugh with Bloomberg. What does this mean for the sort of future of TAPS? Are we getting closer to the time where we hit that doomsday moment of there not being enough oil to keep it running profitably?
Well, this is pretty far long-term oil out there. In order to bring it on, to make the discovery, bring it on shore, they were actually shooting for like 2024, 2025 is when they were looking at this would be online. So it would be out there a ways for that to come on shore, but it certainly does raise the concern. We need to find more oil for TAPS. I have made that commitment to Alyeska President Tom Barrett. I've made that commitment to Alaska that we'll get more oil in that pipeline. So this was certainly one way. There are other ways of doing it, but it's definitely a setback in that area.
Can you talk a little bit about the other ways? I mean, at $45 oil, what where does Alaska have room to grow?
Well, I don't think anybody looks at in 2025 or distance out there at $50 oil. I mean, we've seen the oil cycles come and go, and I don't think anybody is doing exploration at this point assuming that we're going to see 10 years of $50 oil. So we expect oil is going to go up. There's certain things that can be done at lower oil prices. We've seen that in the past in the way of exploration, and so we're optimistic about the future as far as more exploration.
Great, thank you.
Operator, next question.
We have no more questions at this time.
Great, thank you. I wanted to just touch briefly on gas line, since I've got you gathered here. We are, as I said earlier, this absolutely I think accelerates the need to focus on the assurance of the gas line. And as I explained to the legislature in this room a few days prior to the announcement of the special session, about 3 or 4 days before, I said, there's one discussion about fiscal certainty, that the producers want fiscal certainty. We've heard that for decades, and I understand that. But what I said to the legislature leadership is that, we are working on a plan for the project certainty, to make sure that there's a project that's there. If it's economically viable, if it's financeable, if there's a market, that there will be a project. So we're working on that. I was hoping to have that from the producers themselves. I met with them many times and talking about having that kind of written assurance that no individual company would if they stepped away, their gas wouldn't be held out of the project. And they were working on that. I think they're perhaps still working on that. But going into a special session, I have to have something that shows that if we're going to give fiscal certainty, we're going to have project certainty. And so that's what the tax, or the reserves tax, is about. It's not about collecting revenues now, of course. It's about making sure that if someone chooses not to put their gas into a project, leave it in the ground, and not let a project go forward as a result of that, there has to be some financial consequences as a result of that decision. I just don't think that's out of line. So it's only a problem if they choose to not allow the gas that they control to be commercialized. They don't have to commercialize it. They don't have to build a gas line, but they can't keep it off the market. Alex?
Can you say which oil companies are requesting fiscal certainty on oil as part of the Alaska project?
It doesn't really come to me that way as far as which ones are asking for what, is because they're working sort of as a team, and I don't sit down at the individual meetings, whatnot. So I've not had that individual request. I just know that's come up in the meetings as far as one of the requests as far as fiscal certainty on oil, which we've visited that in the Stranded Gas Development Act, and that was found to be pretty unacceptable by Alaskans in general, and I think the legislature as well. So.
What was legislative leadership's response to the proposal of the reserves tax?
We didn't talk specifically about reserves tax. I talked specifically about fiscal certainty, project certainty, and that was an absolute must-have in order to bring something to the legislature and whatnot on the fiscal certainty side. So that had not been finalized at that point, that was necessary, because that was really a sort of really hoping to have gotten something in writing from the producers that would resolve that concern, and I didn't. And so I know meetings are continuing on with the producers on negotiations on different issues, and perhaps that'll be addressed as well. Yes.
Carly Meyer, KTUU. Assuming you've read the article from Exxon CEO saying Alaska is its own worst enemy, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, in some ways I agree, because we have historically allowed others to control our destiny. So in that regard, I would agree with him. And I guess what this is all about, is that we're no longer going to, under this administration, sit back and allow someone else making decisions about the future of our project. As they look at 8 other projects around the world, one of them is an LNG project, one of them is in British Columbia. They're all in competition with Alaska. So the fact that we are stepping up saying, Alaska's going to take care of Alaska, and we do put Alaska first, and they don't have to, because that's not their job. That is my job. And so when I step out and aggressively represent Alaska, I don't apologize. And so he aggressively represents his company, and good for him. They do a great job of it. They're a great company, but we need to do the same here in Alaska. Very good. Thanks everybody. Thanks very much.